relatively young adulthood. And she had gone wild. She lived in Hollywood, California. And finally, the manic episode had more or less run its course. She had somehow avoided hospitalization this time. She had multiple hospitalizations where she would do such strange things. And as the mania seemed to diminish and diminish, an idea came into her mind. And I want to tell you this idea. It was an idea that arrived with the conviction of absolute certainty. We could call it a delusion. Even the language of the terms delusion is a little bit problematic phenomenologically, but we'll use it now. Delusional certainty. What was her certainty? It was this, and you have to imagine me riding along, reading this in the plane. I'm afraid this is building up to something, and I'm afraid what it builds up to, you're going to say, that you're building up just for that? I hope you don't say that, because it's very cool what I'm about to tell you. And it caused me almost to jump out of the plane, but I had no parachute, so I decided not to do it. Anyway, her delusion was that agents of foreign governments, like people from Russia and China and God knows what other foreign governments, had infiltrated the White House in Washington, D.C. Where's she getting this? Out of her own imagination. But it comes fully developed and with conviction. And that what was happening as these agents wormed their way into the White House, they were penetrating into the corridors of American power and of the forces in our country based on its democracy that dictate what happens in our country. They're slowly taking over and usurping the decision-making capacity of the American government, the president, his cabinet, and the rightful people who run our country. And so she saw, I've got to do something about this. And she knew she only had one choice. She had to herself go personally to Washington, D.C. She formed a plan. She was going to fly to Washington, go to the White House, climb the fence around it if she needs to, break into the White House, find the foreign intruders, and bodily throw them out of the door and restore American government to American hands. Are you guys with me on all this? So I'm reading about this darn thing, and she almost tried to make it happen. But what happened is it was the middle of winter when this delusion occurred, and she took a plane and they landed in Denver and they got stuck there in a snowstorm blizzard. And by the 18 hours or something, the runways were frozen over the planes, and she collapsed into a black depression. She wasn't able to finish the job. But had she been able to get to Washington, she would have tried, and she would have been arrested by the Secret Service and taken to a mental hospital. And I've worked with many patients brought by the Secret Service because I've worked in Kansas City, Missouri, which is near Harry Truman, who was alive at the time. Mental patients were constantly trying to bother him. They'd be brought to our hospital, and we'd have to deal with them. So she would have been one of those. So this is not the part that got me excited. But you think about that delusion. See, I tried to bring a phenomenological attitude to the delusion itself. Do we say, is this a delusion, a symptom of schizophrenia or a symptom of bipolar disorder? Bipolar disorder sometimes includes delusional elaborations. Do we just stop there and say, here's the illness? Man, the illness is really bad. It's kind of grandiose, too, because it gives her great power to make a difference to American policy. Grandiosity, that's part of mania also. That's the Golden Globe man. You're looking down. What's the phenomenological meaning of this? I looked at it, and all I can say is it came to me what it is. The White House is a symbol of Patty Duke's own personal autonomy and liberty and identity as an existing human individual. Now, you may not know this about her, but I'm going to tell you. Her childhood was stolen from her. Her parents basically abandoned her and sold her to entertainment agents who then took over her upbringing. And she was exploited to an unimaginable degree to turn herself into a star and into a commercial property. And she tells the story of this. I'm not making this up. This is not a deep interpretation. It was a horrendously abusive, exploitive, violent, awful, awful childhood where all her activity was absorbed into creating wonderful entertainments for the American people. And she didn't get to have friends. She didn't get to go to first grade. She didn't get to have teachers that she loved and adored. All she had was these entertainment agents who were her slave masters. And she gave herself body and soul compliantly to what they wanted, and was enormously successful, but it cost her a childhood. You can't lose your childhood and not have to pay a price later. I view her breakdown into manic depressive illness, bipolar disorder, what we're going to call it, as a sequel to a stolen childhood. That's already part of its meaning. But think about the imagery there. You see, America needs to be run by the American government and by Americans who are elected rightfully. But instead, you've got people from outside entering, invading, infiltrating, and taking it over. So we're being run by foreign powers. Patty Duke was herself run by foreign powers. She surrendered as they infiltrated her mind as a child and gave herself over to performing their agendas. And whatever her own original agendas might have been, she scarcely even got to discover. And that's the background of her psychological disturbance, and it's symbolized vividly in the delusion about the White House. It's perfect that it was a manic episode coming to an end, because a manic episode, as I understand it, and I learned this from Bernie Brandschaft, and you'll read about it a little bit more specifically in the paper Shattered World Psychotic States that you guys have assigned. Probably none of you looked at it yet. But a manic episode has as its primary phenomenological meaning that it's a breaking free from enslaving ties to other people that basically take you over with their own agendas and annihilate you as a separate person in your own right. That's basically what a manic episode is. Patty Duke is a classic example of this. Here's the thing that got me so excited. So I'm reading this and kind of happy that I'm seeing, oh my God, yeah, the invasion of the White House is kind of the takeover of her mind by the entertainment agents. And she wants to get rid of them, to free herself, to be a free, autonomous being. And that's what a manic episode is. And she's in the middle of a manic episode right now. So, of course, it's going to be like this. And then I went back to looking at the overall structure of her book. And I saw then that it's actually very important and perfect that her book has these extra chapters interposed after each one of hers. Patty Duke, the medical. Patty Duke, the medical. Patty Duke, the medical. The medical diagnostic chapters are kind of medical authority, telling the story of her from their authoritative point of view. She tells the story of her life as she lived it. The fact that she has allowed this authority is another foreign agent from a foreign government, symbolically, to be incorporated in the sacred unfolding text of her own spiritual journey she's trying to tell. So actually, the structure of the book to let an external authority interpose his stuff right into hers is a perfect mirror of her manic depressive pattern itself, of the great struggle of her life, which was, on the one hand, to give in and give herself over to performing and conforming to the agendas of others, and on the other side, trying to find some way of establishing her own personal liberation. So that's the great struggle of almost all manic depressive patients that I've studied or tried to understand or worked with. So have I made it clear enough so you can see why I want to jump? I want to celebrate when I saw that. I said, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't rip out the pages of the other guy's chapters. Of course she put someone else's chapters in. That's exactly it. That's the mirror of the whole thing. I wanted to shout and scream. I had nobody to scream at. I looked in the back. There's this door you can take off and jump out if you want to. I don't know if you can get it open in the middle of the flight, but I thought I had no parachute. It wouldn't be any good to just go down there and kill myself. But I got so excited, and then I was able to talk about it a little bit at SLN, and people got all excited about it. I don't know if I've made it clear. I hope I have a little bit, at least. Anyway, so you have there are two aspects to the story of Patty Duke that I wanted to highlight. One is that I'm looking at the manic depressive pattern phenomenologically, not medically, seeing its meaning in terms of a person who was captured psychologically and spiritually by outside powers, the entertainment industry as a young child, who struggled to come into her own, and it's the great battle of the so-called manic depressive. The second aspect, this is repeating myself before, had to do with the phenomenology of hearing your own diagnosis. She was overjoyed. Why? Because she thought she was the devil. The other young man was trying not to be his father, trying not to be the devil. And when he heard that he was manic depressive, bipolar, that was equivalent to saying to him that he is the devil. But only phenomenology would recognize a thing like that. A person operating medically wouldn't even think about a deal like that. Now, let me say one last thing about diagnosis and what I'm like about it. When my patients ask me their diagnosis, for example, especially if they have killer diagnoses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, those are two killers. Those are considered to be the worst psychoses that there are. I would never tell them that was their diagnosis. Sometimes they find out anyway. But why would I tell them? I don't really believe in the whole diagnostic system. And so what's it going to mean to them if I do? And what I generally say, like I had one patient she carried a quasi-permanent diagnosis over many years of schizophrenia. And she would say, what do you think my diagnosis is, George? And I said, I don't really know. I don't really go in for diagnostic thinking. She said, yeah, but what is it? What is it? What is it? They tell me I'm schizophrenic. What does that even mean, schizophrenic? And then finally she almost pushed me to the wall. Tell me my diagnosis. And I said, well, listen, I'm really not going to go down that path no matter what you do. And here's a secret that you may not know. The whole diagnostic system is pretty much just a big bag of BS. That's what I genuinely really think. And so we could put this diagnosis or that diagnosis, I don't know. If you force me to give you a diagnosis of some kind, I don't know, I could give you a diagnosis like maybe post-traumatic stress disorder or something. You've had a lot of trauma in your life. That's it. That's my diagnosis. You're very safe on a ground level. That's the one I don't mind too much. You know, we've all had a lot of trauma, and people who are diagnosed schizophrenic and manic depressive have massive trauma in every instance. Nobody gets there are no lives free of it that you don't see that. So there are some diagnoses a little more benign. You can't do anything too much with it. I don't even like the word disorder, though. About post-traumatic reaction is a little better. Disorder sounds like something's gotten disordered and scrambled in your brain. And there's no evidence for that. You know, people make all kind of claims about that. It's not right. So I fight like hell. And I've come to the idea, actually, that it should be considered unethical in our field to tell people their diagnoses. Not because we should keep secrets from them, but because the system of thinking on which it is based has got too many holes in it. It has so many holes you could drive fleets of trucks through those holes. And what are you telling people when you inform them of these pseudo-scientific claims? They're presented with great certainty. And I have a story I'm building up on, which I don't have time to tell, so I'm going to hold off next time, of what happened to one of my patients when she was for the first time told she was schizophrenic. I want to stop there today, guys. By the way, you can get the